People always say that you have to have money to make money, and that there's an extraordinary level of sacrifice on the road to success. So how is it that investors like us who didn't start out with much money and who don't rely on banks and credit, how is it that we can increase our income and build our wealth in a way that doesn't require us replacing one full-time job with another while still enjoying the things in life that matter most to us? That has always been the big question, and this podcast reveals the answers. I am Carrie Like, and this is the Investor Warrior. Hey everyone. Happy Friday, TGIF. Sorry for the late entrance here. We just had some technological issues, but we have gotten past that and we are ready. So I want to introduce my good friend, Marlena Dates, to the show. And thank you so much, Marlena, for coming on for Deal Talk.
Well, thank you for being patient, waiting for me to figure out my tech issues. So I'm glad to be here with you finally.
We're all good. It'll be worth it because this is a deal that you guys are actually closing on today where you are getting paid for the second time, it sounds like. So I was really interested to go over this deal from start to finish. And so it was worth the delay. So thank you again for coming on. So you guys, this is Deal Talk, where we go through a current deal that either myself or one of my partners or one of my networks, people in my network are doing. And Marlena has been part of my network. We've known each other now for years. We've actually partnered on a few deals together. And so I knew that she would have a deal to bring to us that is current. And she does, because it is closing today. So this is actually a wholetail deal, different from wholesale. So Marlena, if you could briefly describe the difference between wholesale and wholetail before we go through this wholetail deal.
Sure, absolutely. And you just locked up there, so I hope that there you are. Okay. So the difference between a wholesale and a wholetail deal, and you might even actually consider this kind of technically a wholesale. So in wholesale, there are assignments, assign your position to an end buyer that will close on the deal. And that's what a lot of people think of when they think of a wholesale transaction, but technically that's an assignment of contract. When you actually double close on it, that's a wholesale deal. So we kind of did that, but took it a step further, which is what we call a wholetail, where we'll get, say, minimum 3 months private money financing on it. We'll put it on the MLS, and we'll just take the highest and best buyer that we can find, even sometimes working with FHA or VA, depending on the situation in the house. A lot of people consider a wholetail to be kind of a light rehab, kind of put some lipstick on it, and they'll call that a wholetail. But we beg to differ. We don't even clean out the inside of the property. We just leave it as we bought it. We put it up on the market, and then we oftentimes do so much. Well, every time we do that, we do so much better than we would do with a traditional wholesale deal.
Got it. Okay. And why is that? Is it because you're getting more exposure because you're getting it up on the MLS?
Yeah, I mean, we have a pretty sizable buyers list, and we're always trying to build that. And we have some really great buyers that are happy to move fast at a good price. But if we see the price is not kind of measuring up to where we really think it could be, especially if we know that there's comps on the MLS that sold that are going to justify a higher price, then sometimes we'll just make the decision to go ahead and close on it ourselves and do that strategy.
Okay, great. Actually, we know of someone, and I think you heard this story, where he wholetailed the deal and he did light rehab on it. What he did was he went to Home Depot, bought a saw, cut down the edges so you could see the house, returned the saw, and then put it up on the market and got way more because you could actually see the house. He did like light landscaping and then even returned the pole saw that he used.
Yeah. It's
just like, that's interesting.
And that happens a lot. I mean, a lot of people think if they're going to do a rehab, they have to kind of touch everything and make it spectacularly beautiful. But realistically, if you can make it livable for somebody, you're going to open up, if you're on the MLS, to a whole new group of buyers that you wouldn't have touched necessarily otherwise. And it's also a great way as a wholesaler to build your buyers list in the process.
Yep, I agree. Okay, so let's go through this deal. Where did you find this particular deal and how did you find it?
Sure. So we do a lot of direct mail marketing. We do some other stuff too, but that's still our bread and butter. That's where most of our deals come from. So this was a list I pulled from PropStream that was a divorces list. And it was interesting because I learned this about PropStream in the process of this. I'm like, this lady has been divorced for so long. It's like, how did she even come up on this list? And I checked with PropStream and they were like, oh, well, it's anybody that's ever been in the public record as having had a divorce. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So she came up, and what it was is an elderly woman, and she had been moved by her son that lives down here and his daughter and his wife, her daughter-in-law, up north to live with family because she was getting older. And so the house is sitting there vacant. It needs everything because it hasn't been fixed up in all the time that she's lived there. So it needs a roof. The AC we got working just for the buyer we're selling it to because it was working. And then when he inspected, it wasn't. So we fixed that. No big deal. But it pretty much needs everything. I think even an electrical panel. But it's close to livable. Like you could spruce it up a little bit and move a tenant in there and it wouldn't be that bad. So anyhow, we found her on this list, and the son and the daughter-in-law were responsible for selling it. And I will say, and I'm sure you're going to ask more questions about this, but they came in to talk to us and said, first thing right out of the gate, we have an appraisal as is for $75,000. So that's where I think it gets to be a really good lesson for people who might be listening that maybe don't understand, like just because somebody says that they have a price in mind and even justification for it, even from a professional licensed person, doesn't mean that that's where you're going to end up. So
Right.
I'll go ahead and turn it back to you for whatever questions you might have.
Well, and this is really where the cost of sale guideline really comes in, right? Knowing what it costs to sell a house is going to be really important because you might be educating that seller on what they're going to net at the end of the day. Just because they have a $75,000 as is appraisal, number one, doesn't mean that they're going to get that if they put it up on the house, because price is much different. The value of a house might be one thing, but what people are willing to pay for that house might be another thing. That's number one. Number two, they're going to have a realtor list it. So they're going to be paying at least 6% commissions. They're going to have holding costs. They're going to have utilities, insurance, taxes to pay for while they're holding it. So when you really break it down off of that $75,000, what they're actually going to be netting, sometimes it's pretty close to what you are offering, right? And then all of a sudden, when you give them your offer, it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Well, even better on this, we never made an offer, which is kind of our strategy in general. So I'll be happy to go into more about how we do that. But ideally, we never name a number. If we're naming a number, it's because we've deemed that you're not motivated. You're probably never going to do business with us. And so we'll give you a number, usually a range that is in kind of like a quick estimate range without even calculating anything really, just to kind of see if you have any flexibility kind of in the range that we might need to be. Because if not, it's not worth putting numbers to paper and really doing all your due diligence on that. And I think a lot of newer investors will spend all their time looking at every single lead and trying to examine if it's a deal, when realistically they should be focusing more on the motivation. So kind of getting into that, this woman had moved, they've got a vacant property, you've got family members that are responsible for keeping it. They had the electricity and everything on, you know, everything was still being paid for. They still have taxes, you know, they've got, it's not a super bad area, but it's definitely not the best area either. And so like you've got concerns about maybe people vandalizing or, you know, squatting or any sort of thing that could happen. So there was a lot of layer of motivation there. And that's what told us it was worthwhile to continue on in this conversation. But when we recognize a motivated person, the last thing we want to do is name a number.
Yeah.
So, you know, always trying to get their number first, which obviously they led with their number, you know, what they were looking to get, and they had a justification for it. And we went and did some research and everything, and we looked at it and we're like, you know, I think our number, they're at 75, our number was, and let me double check here because I did pull it up. I told Carrie earlier that I knew the numbers, but then I was thinking I've been using this as an example deal. So let me double check that I've got my numbers right before I say them. So we were thinking at the time that the Zestimate on it was 140. And I could see some comps that were selling for like 165, but they were a little bit different, a little bit bigger. I think had an extra bathroom. So I was kind of thinking somewhere in probably the like 150 range would be a fair estimate for it. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. We were thinking it needed $50,000 in repairs for ARV. To be able to get that high price at the 150, and then about 20,000 to do rental repairs.
Okay.
Our comps, I found one that was in like condition and a like property very close by that sold on the MLS for $95,000. So that was really promising to me because it also, the kitchen was gutted. So it would have taken a lot more to be able to move somebody into it. So I was looking at the as-is value is 75. I came up with the same number that the appraiser did. Although again, I still had that comp that I was kind of like, I think I could potentially push this higher. So our strategy when we decide, and I should have a number here. I'm sorry. Trying to look for something in my system that I can't find right now. I think, and I'll correct this later if I'm wrong, but I think our maximum allowable offer number was about 59. So we were hoping that maybe we could try and figure out, you know, if there was some room to maybe even do something creative, if they just couldn't come down off the 75. But we never think for other people. We never assume that the number that they give is actually the best that they can do. And even, you know, we'll ask them that on the first round. As soon as they say a number, we'll say, you know, I'm not sure we could do that much. Is that the best that you can do? Do you have any flexibility? And if they say, no, not really, you know, and in this case, well, I mean, we do have this appraisal. Then we go back to look at the deal and we say, okay, well, we couldn't do that price in cash. It's just a yes or no for us. And then can we potentially do something else with this? Let's talk to them about this one because, you know, she's not living there. They clearly don't really need the money. They kind of wanted the money to pay off some debts and the mom wanted to give the daughter-in-law some money for helping out. So it was just, you know, it wasn't like a dire situation. So we went back to them and the first thing that we did, we didn't approach talking about terms or anything like that. We just said, you know, I'm so sorry, but after doing our research, there's just no way that we'd be able to pay 75 or really anywhere close to it. So we don't want to insult you by having to make you an offer that's so low that it's not even something you'd entertain taking. And then we just shut up, right? And just leave it there. And she thought about it for a moment. And this is the daughter-in-law that we were talking to. She thought about it. She said, you know what? Let me talk to my husband and my mother-in-law and we'll get back to you tomorrow. And we're like, okay, that's a good sign. So again, like we didn't try and offer anything. We didn't try and come up with an alternate scenario. We just said, that's not something that's going to work for us. And we left it in their ball court to decide what the next step was. So great thing is the next day they called us as scheduled, which is good. They didn't try and ghost on us, which will happen a lot of times with people. And they called back. So that's showing their motivation to move forward in some way. And she said, you know, we talked about it. And if you could do 50, then we'd be willing to move forward, but we have to have 50. And we're like, let me, well, my husband took the call. Let me talk to my wife and see if that's something that we might
you froze
to do. I know, so let me, I can see you. I'll wait until you can see me. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you. You just froze.
I know, it's freezing. Okay, yeah, you were still in motion. Okay, so they said 50, and again, I'm pretty sure our maximum allowable offer for our formula was around 59. So to us, that's like score. Like we just got a better deal without even trying to. Like, you know, if we had to name a number, we probably would have given the highest and best that we could do at 59. So when they said 50, and this happens a lot for us, so I just want to say this is not a fluke. This is our approach, and it works often than not. So I just want to encourage everybody to try to use this. I always tell our team when we're training people kind of dance around the number instead of giving it to them because it's the only leverage that you really have. So the moment you throw it out there, whether it's high or low or whatever it is, you're kind of like drawing a line in the sand. And we like to just stay on the seller's side as much as possible. It's like, you know, maybe we could talk about some other things that you could do here. What about listing it? And they were like, no, we don't want to list it. That's just a bunch of hassle and we have to clean it up and we've got to do this and that. So we're like, okay, so they really want to work with us. And sure enough, we got it closed pretty quickly. Everything was wonderful. We're very happy. So we closed on it. But before that, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself when we closed on it, we put it out to our buyers list, which is always the first step that we do, even if we want to close, because it's helping us establish.
Can I ask you something too? Before we go to the buyers, can I just ask you a hypothetical question? If they didn't call you, let's say they did ghost you, and you had this number of 59,000 in your head, what would your approach be if they hadn't called you back?
Well, we are relentless in following up with people and we'll let them know, you know, we'll send them phone calls with messages and, hey, I don't want to bother you. So, if you're just not interested, just let me know, like no harm, no foul. I can follow up with you down the road if you're not ready today. We'll text them, anything we can to get them on the phone. But it's always like, I hope I didn't mess something up with you. I just want to make sure that like everything's okay with us. So it's very focused on the relationship, not so much on here, let me try and get in touch with you so I can throw a number at you because I want this deal.
Yep.
So we've been in contract with somebody before, another wholesale that we did a few years ago, and very similar numbers and everything. But the seller, and she's one of our best testimonials to this day. It's like an awesome deal. But she initially went under contract with us and then wanted to back out. And I just followed up with her like she was somebody that I cared about, because I did. I cared about her story and about her situation with her family and everything that was going on in her life. And over the course of a year, I just checked in on her. How are you doing? If there's anything I can do to help you, just let me know. And a year later, she texted me and said, hey, I'm ready to move forward. And thank you so much for not letting me go, staying on top of me and just being here for me. And so she credits it as a life-changing event in her life. And I'm just so pleased to have been a part of that, So I just want to say that to everybody. Make sure that you're following up. Just because something's not a deal today or somebody ghosts, or even if there's like a challenge in the relationship that you have with them in some way, maybe they don't trust you or you don't feel like you have the credibility, just keep reaching out, because building that relationship just by talking to somebody over time does build your credibility and the trust with them, because they feel like like you're a friend over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm interested too, how many times did you have to mail to this particular deal until they called you? Was it once? Was there a follow-up to it?
This one was one time, but we do keep mailing our lists over time. I mean, we're still mailing lists that we purchased years ago. So we don't let the data die until we talk to somebody. So if you're still on our list and we haven't talked to you and gotten a yes or no, or you're not in our like lead system, we're still going to follow up with you by phone, by text. Sometimes we don't do a lot of texting, but by text, definitely by direct mail, anything else that we can do as well.
Okay. All right. So let's bring it back now. So you've got it under contract, and typically you're going to put it out to your buyer's list. So then what happens?
Okay, so our buyer's list, and I just want to make a clear point for anybody who is like not real sure about this, hasn't spoken with an attorney. It is very illegal for you to put somebody else's property out to market in a public way, whether you're posting a picture of a house or you're giving an address or giving details about a property. Any of that, if you don't have title to it in your own name or in your company name, is illegal for you to do. It's a third-degree felony. So we will put up like a little blurb on social media, like, hey, we've got this smoking hot deal in Daytona 32117, and it could be great as a rental or a flip, asking whatever price, right? So we're talking about a deal, not a house. We do own a contract. We have a deal on paper that we have a right to assign or sell to somebody else. So we're all in the clear to do that. But when people question me about it all the time online, why don't you send me the pictures? I want to do my due diligence. And there's like a certain few people that I've spoken to many times. I'm like, I can't do that. So just be aware of that. A lot of people are doing it wrong. I just want to throw that out there. But we do have the right to send out our contract terms and details of the house. As long as we state that we're not selling the house, we're selling an assignable contract, to our private buyers list. So if you have opted into our private buyers list, then you are able to get this private marketing that has details about the house. So we sent that out and immediately had a whole bunch of people that were interested in seeing it. They came and checked it out. We got multiple offers, and they were all right around that like $70,000 mark. I mean, we got some lower ones, but all consistently they were around 70. And so I was looking at it, and I mean, to make $20,000 in a few days off of a contract that you just signed, I mean, that's great. That's no big deal. To, it is a big deal, I should say, to walk away from that and just say, that's not good enough. But for us lately, our average has been $25,000 per deal. That's something that we've been working on over the years to raise. And a $20,000 deal, when I can see a comp that sold for 95, it just, I hate to say it wasn't enough for me, but I'm like, this is a perfect candidate to go do a wholesale, because if you account for all the expenses, which we usually are taking 5% for the upfront closing costs, because we pay for the seller side too. And then we've got, say, 2 or 3% on the back end, maybe including a small discount to the seller or something like that. Although we're always trying to price it really competitively, so we don't have to come off the price much. And then your holding costs, obviously, you got taxes, insurance, and utilities, and all that sort of thing. And then we also have lending, because we didn't use our own money. So between all of those things, like you really do have to account for your numbers, as you were saying, on the front end. But we have a little calculator that we use, Excel spreadsheet or in our Podio now, and we can just plug the numbers in and it kind of tells us what the end all would be after all those expenses. And so I felt sure enough about being able to sell it at least in 95 on the MLS and then take off those expenses to still be able to make a greater profit than that 20,000. And I would also do a creative thing, which is get that $20,000 out on the front end from the lender so that I got that assignment fee up front. And then we also get the back end side of the deal as well once it's all said and done and closed.
So how do you get the front end of the assignment deal? You said you got the front end of the assignment fee, $20,000 through your lender. Explain how you did that.
Sure. And, you know, most lenders, especially if you're new to real estate, they're going to want you to have some skin in the game just to make sure that you're not going to default and walk away. But, you know, once you've done a couple of deals and people know that you pay your debts and you always pay on time and they're not going to have any problems with you. We don't go to the lenders, and we have private lenders. We just send them a text, usually maybe a quick phone call. And we say, hey, we've got this deal that we're looking at. We're thinking of closing on it, doing this wholesale strategy. We expect to be in and out in 3 months. So we're looking for somebody that'll do like 3 months minimum lending, but, you know, a year term typical, and interest only. And in this case, we had 12% interest only. So even with a higher rate loan, you know, it's workable. You still make good money. If the numbers justify it, it doesn't really matter what the rate is on your loan. It's like a very small amount of additional money to go up, and your lenders are super happy with it. So everybody gets a win-win. But so I don't say, hey, I'm looking for this for the rehab and I'm looking this for the house and I'm looking for closing costs and I'm looking for money out. I just say, I'm looking for somebody that can lend me $73,000 on this deal with an anticipated couple months turnaround, but a 3-month minimum interest to you, no matter how soon or how long we close. And they say, okay, send me the details of the deal, and I show it to them. And they say, yes, I'd be willing to do that. Right. So the numbers just have to make sense for them in the deal that, you know, if something were to happen, they had to take the house, they'd be able to turn around and sell it, recoup their asset, their financial assets, and potentially make some additional money as well. So in this case, somebody that we worked with before was happy to do it. The money was, you know, over to title within a couple of days' time once we made the decision to move forward with that. And, you know, it sucks for the buyers because a lot of them really wanted the deal. And I personally know some investors who are like, you know, when sellers of contracts, wholesalers do that, it kind of isn't really right in some way. Like they think it's like if you're putting it out for sale to somebody and somebody wants to buy it, you should have to sell it to them. And I beg to differ. I mean, we're fiduciaries of our business. We're responsible for doing the best that we can. And so if we can see a line to, you know, we get plenty of offers, sure, but we don't have to take any of them. If there's more money on the table and we want to do another deal, another strategy out of that, then, you know, that it's our deal. We own it. We get to decide what we're going to do with it. So I just want to encourage people, if you're not getting the feedback that you like from your buyers, it doesn't mean you can't do something else. And if you're newer and you have a contract and you think there's more spread in it, but your buyers aren't giving you the offers that you want, reach out to somebody like myself or to Carrie or whomever that you are networked with or want to reach out to. I mean, more than enough people that I know would be happy to take it, just, you know, interacting with you for the first time. So don't be shy about reaching out to people and saying, hey, I've got this deal. I think it could be more than this, but, you know, I need some help kind of doing a new strategy with it. And you'll learn so much in the process. But yeah, so we closed on it. We got our closing costs paid and we made over $20,000 on the front end. I want to say it was like 21 something. Okay. So that was great. Put that back into marketing. That's why we take it out on the front end, not because, you know, we need the money so bad, but I like to have all of my deals fund themselves. So that was kind of the theory on doing it that way.
And did you set up the loan so that you had monthly payments, or was all the interest paid on the back end of the loan?
You know, we prefer it just to pay on the back end because it's such a short timeline. In this case, it was payments, but then we were set to close so soon. The lender said, you know what, just wait and we'll take care of this at closing. But typically we ask to wait. If it's a longer timeline, if we know we're going to hold something for a year, we'll make payments typically. But some lenders just, they don't really care. They don't want to receive payments because it's more accounting.
Right. Cool. Okay. So you've purchased this property. You've put a little over $20,000 into your bank account that came from the proceeds of the loan. And now what?
Okay, so first thing we did, and as I mentioned before, we didn't clean out the property. We didn't even take new pictures. We took the pictures that we initially walked through the house with the seller, and we put those on the MLS with a flat fee listing. And the flat fee listing, I think we have like a broker that we go through that puts us with
Mhm.
another person for it. But I believe we were with flatfee.com on this one, and it's like $99. And
Mhm.
you can list it for a 6-month period, and you act as the listing agent, even though you're not an agent. You're just for sale by owner, basically. But then everybody on the MLS that's looking can see it. You can put it out to the public sites, which we did because we own this, but we would never do that if it was just our contract that we were trying to list, because then
Right.
do the public thing that I mentioned before. But so we started getting flooded with calls from agents and their buyers. We did have an early contract. Somebody offered us, because we initially put it up at 114.9, and somebody offered us 106.5 with a commercial, or not a commercial, a conventional loan. And so we said, sure, no problem. So we got about a week and a half in, they did their inspection and everything. And at some point, the lender decided after the fact that this person wasn't able to get the loan. But it happened pretty quickly, so we were out of it. And then we had somebody else that was coming from out of state contact us and offer us 120 sight unseen, which we were like, no, I doubt it. So we tried to talk to him for a while and see like how legitimate it was. And it was pretty legitimate, and he wanted to buy with a loan as well, but it was kind of dragging on. So we're like, forget it. We're going to move with somebody that I think is at the right price point. So we ended up with this buyer. His mom had money to put into a real estate investment. I think she's from Asia somewhere. And she was just like, take my money and put it into real estate. And so we went out with an agent and found our house and was like, heck yeah, I'll pay for that. And so, cash buyer. And so the end of that story was everything's gone really fast for us, because he was like, I'm ready to close in 2 weeks. And everything was done and ready to close except for the lien search at the city. And we don't usually close, over an open lien search, right? Because you never know what might come up. And some people will do it and they don't care. But typically we try and make sure all our ducks in a row and everybody's happy and, well protected. And so it hadn't come back yet. And the city was designating today as the time for it to come back. And so even though we were all ready to close, and this speaks to people that are like, I can close in 7 to 14 days. Sure, you can, as long as the city is working with you to make that happen, because otherwise they can really extend your deal, which is what happened. But
So you did the lien search, but they also wanted to do a lien search when they bought it.
Well, we did it when we bought.
Right.
When you're selling it to somebody else, that whole process, title search, all that stuff has to be
Right.
Yep.
Right. So what was holding it up was their title, their lien search when they were buying it from you.
That's right. So they did have it right. The title company said, if you want to sign something, hold harmless.
Got it.
And we agreed, well, we offered, I should say, to leave money in escrow to cover anything in case there was something that came up. But they were like, we'll just wait until it comes back. So, sometimes it just is what it is, but that's all right.
Okay. So my first question is, did your buyer know how much you bought the property for just a few weeks ago?
Good question. Not in this case, although if you want to do what I'm about to talk about, you have to be really on top of your title company, because our favorite title company that knows everything and how to do this the right way has multiple times done it wrong because we didn't double check to make sure closing that it was done the right way. So we, instead of just letting everything go through the typical local channels for reporting from the title company when they report like a mortgage, and well, I guess they still do the mortgage, but for the purchase price for transfer
the doc stamps.
Right. So, and you can only do this if you do it in a trust, because otherwise, like, it's all going to be public information. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. So when you buy inside of a land trust, you keep your name off of public record, and you can also keep the purchase price off of public record. But typically the title company will send the doc stamps over to the local office, the county office, where the doc stamps get recorded. And then you can figure out that triggers the purchase price, because the purchase price is going to be the doc stamps are a percentage of the purchase price.
Right. And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail, but I'm just curious, do you think you could do it in your own name without the land trust if they still sent it to the state?
I don't know, but I don't think so, because I think I've talked to the title company about this.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But before I made that statement, I was just like, I wonder.
I don't know. I'll have to ask Andrea about that or Sue.
Okay. Well, so anyway, we decided, and we always do this, when we're the buyer on a contract, we buy in the name of a land trust. And if we assign that deal at closing, it just assigns into the new buyer's name, and the land trust never comes into like actual existence. But our company acts as the beneficiary. So we still have the right over whatever is going on in the contract. So we did actually close in the land trust in this case because we closed. And that, as Carrie said, kind of conceals your identity. Only the trustee is known. And so it was our a trust company that we use that did that for us. And so our name is off of everything. You'll never, except for our personal residence, you'll never find our name on anything in the public record because we don't ever buy anything in our own names. There are a lot of reasons for that, but for the scope of this, we like to really just remain private, especially if we're going to hold a rental or something. We don't want somebody to be able to sue us because they know that we're the owner. We present ourselves as management. When we're selling a deal, even we'll say, I don't know, we'll have to talk to the owners or our partners. Like, we're always referring to somebody else because nobody knows. Like, you can say whatever you want, and we don't mean to like be misleading in some way, but it's just, when somebody knows you're the person, it changes the way that you can have a conversation about certain things. So anyhow, we close in the trust, and in this case, we directed the title company, please make sure you send the transfer taxes to the state directly. There's a special form called a DR 228 in Florida for that, and so they sent it to the state. And then the local Volusia County, where we're at, where we closed this deal, will only show $100 as the purchase price on the public record. And there are ways that you can kind of back it out and figure out what people paid. But most people, when they glance at that, they don't know that. They'll just see, okay, I don't even know what it sold for. In this case, obviously, there's a huge spread between what we bought it for and what we ended up selling it for. So that could have potentially really hurt us. And I will tell you, on the deals that they have, it's accidentally not worked out the way that it was meant to, we have gotten hurt on the price points on those deals because people are like, oh, you just paid whatever. And even if we're like, yeah, but we did this, and this to rehab it, which literally happened on a deal this past year, and it took us a year to finally close it because we did rehab it. And people saw our previous price and they were like, and we're like, no, that has nothing to do with the value, but in their mind, it does.
It creates a bias because they see what you purchased it for. They see that it was in a very short period of time. I mean, it's the same thing with banks triggering second appraisals. Like, they have no idea what you've done to that property or how much work you've put into it. They just see that you bought it here and you're selling it for here. And there's a very short time frame in between those two purchase prices. And it does create a bias in buyers' minds. They're like, I don't want to pay that. They just paid like $50,000 less.
Yeah. Well, and then too, they don't really account for the cost to sell, as we were talking about earlier. And, even if they know because they bought a house before, they're not going to stop and account for all those things. They think if it's 50 and it's selling for 100, you're making $50,000. They don't know that you're not. Now, in this case, I mean, after all our expenses, we are making a little over $40,000. So, I mean, it is, in this case, a good deal. But the one that we did last year that got put into public records inappropriately, we right off the bat did all this work to it, and then have been trying to sell it for a reasonable price ever since. And I mean, at the end of the day, we made barely anything on it and had a lot of risk because it was vacant the whole time, and it was an hour and 45 minutes away from us. So it was a pain to get to try and show and do anything that we needed to do. And we flat fee listed, so we didn't have a local agent handling it for us. So you need to be careful and weigh all these things and make sure your title company is doing what you need them to do.
Okay, so you made a little bit over $40,000, where if you had wholesaled it, you would have made about $20,000. So you basically doubled your profit just by closing on it, reselling it on the retail market. And what was the time frame? If you had wholesaled it, when would you have wholesaled it? How long ago was that?
So we got it at the end of November, and it was probably the first or second week in December that we decided to close on it. I think we still had to wait for the lien search to come back because it was still the Daytona city that was kind of taking some time. So I say we probably were, I'd have to look back in the details of it, but probably mid-December we closed on it. And then we put it on the market, and we were under contract to close by the end of January with that first financing buyer. And then that fell through. And then we had a bunch of offers we could have taken, but I was just like, no, I mean, if we're getting some of these outlandishly high offers, we should like press the issue a little bit more. We got 3 months minimum financing on it. So might as well just wait and see if anything better turns up, you know? And we were getting a lot of calls from people and people wanting to see it. I will say we always endeavor to batch showings together. So we don't try, I mean, it happens sometimes because you just can't control it if you want to show it sometimes, but you know, we try and get everybody to come through at the same time. So they're kind of like jumping at the opportunity to put through their offer and hopefully be the winning offer. So we did that, and we ended up with the person that we ended up with at, you know, 100 he was paying, and that was our asking price. We had eventually dropped the price down because we felt that that was fair. So better than the 95 that we saw the comp for, but right in line with what I was expecting.
So if you could guesstimate, like how much time between the time that you closed on it to today, the time that you're selling it, how much time do you think you had invested from the time you closed on it? So not the marketing, not the negotiating, but the time you closed on it to the time you're selling it today. How many hours would you say?
Let's see. It took me maybe all of an hour to do the flappy listing. You know, my husband Josh has been handling a lot of our acquisitions lately as we're hiring a new person. And so he was the one that did most of the work. He also works a lot with our buyers. So he fielded a lot of phone calls for that, and he did the showings. And we did more than we would typically do. Usually we show it once and we end up having a deal that we're going to close on. And that was kind of the strategy at the beginning. So that would have been typically the case if that person had been able to close, we would have only showed it once. But in this case, just because of the way it kind of worked out with that buyer and his financing, we ended up showing it a few times. So I'd say probably all told, I mean, we did some extra stuff like go over there and fix the air conditioner. It's a little atypical for that reason. So I'd say if it was a typical deal, maybe 5 hours, and this deal maybe call it 10.
Okay. So typically you're going to give up 5 of your hours to make another $20,000, which is a pretty good pay day. Because if I'm doing my calculations correctly, that's $4,000 an hour.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Well, I'll say too, like I've never stepped foot in the house. I happened to have driven by there. I was working on my computer in the car. I have a little lap desk. So, you know, we drive around and drive for dollars and do stuff as a family sometimes to get the kids out of the house. So I've sat in front of it, but even typically, you know, I wouldn't go to the house. And oftentimes, you know, when we have people on our team, we never see the house.
Right. So, and I just want to make that point because a lot of us would take the $20,000 assignment fee thinking, oh, that's easy. It's quick. It's done. But in your case, you knew you had that comp of 95,000. You knew that you could probably get more. It wasn't like you were speculating, right? It wasn't like, oh, that sounds good, but maybe let's just throw it up there and look. Like you had some evidence to make an informed decision on. And then you closed on it using private funds and you got that assignment fee then anyways. So you got that $20,000 even by closing on it. And then you made another $20,000 just a few months later with, okay, let's say in this case, it was 10 hours into it, but that was with kids and your family. And so that I just wanted to point that out because you just invested a little bit more time into it. You made an informed decision and then you doubled your profit.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us will leave money on the table. And I'm like a victim of this. I've done this before where I've left money on the table because I took the easy way thinking, you know what, I'm just going to take it. It's easy. And didn't really think about the other options that I had.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you too, I mean, we've kind of had to learn this lesson the hard way because we don't close on all of our deals. And I know a lot of investors who are, especially these days, like close on everything because you'll make more money. And so we're always trying to make a good decision about it. And like, we don't want to get into it, you know, like this one we had to hold for a year is like a pain in the butt. Like we don't want to do that. Like we want to be in and quick unless it's something that we're intending to hold on to for the long term. Right.
Right.
So I'm always trying to weigh what I see in the market. And I'll give a quick example. We had another deal that not too long before this, we sold to one of our buyers and we ended up making $16,000 on it, which, you know, is a great deal. But again, way less than what we're used to making on an average deal. And so, and the thing was, the lady was hard to get in touch with, the seller. She lived in the home, really, really hard to schedule with. And so, and we had a few buyers that were really interested. I think we had it up on the market for say like 105 or something like that, or 109. And we ended up, I want to say at like 95 or something. I forget what it was exactly, but like we had this spread and they weren't offering us too much compared to what we were asking. And we couldn't get enough buyers in there to really generate that, competition. So we just kind of were faced with, this is what we've got unless we want to work really hard to get in with this lady and it's like dragging on and we needed to close. We can close on it, but I was looking at comps. I was feeling like the best we could get for it was maybe 125. And after all our expenses, wherever it was, the numbers were just so tight to me. I was like, we could end up making only 10 on it if it doesn't go well. And I couldn't see a lot of justification for the comps being higher. But given this market as it is right now, and I had a foundation issue too. So Josh turned me off to it. He's like, no, we don't want to deal with that. Like, let's just move on. Like, we'll take it. It's an easy one. So not like a month later, the buyer sent us like, and I mean, they're multiple buyers. They're like good friends of us. Like they like working with us. We like working with them. But they sent us what they did with the house. They basically just painted it and they put it on the market and they made like $55,000 off of it. So they basically wholetailed it. I mean, they did a little lipstick, but if we had closed on it and just put it on the market like we did in this case, I'm sure we could have probably made way more than even $40,000 off of it.
Yeah, this is a crazy market. So we listed a house on Monday or Tuesday, and we got a offer $25,000 over what we listed it for. And I was like, but we also had like 4 showings. So we ended up, after we looked at the square footage, and we probably priced it a little too low based on the square footage because there was a converted house, and they were like, well, we measured the house and we think it's going to appraise. So we ended up going under contract with them. And, if we meet somewhere in between our purchase price that we originally listed it for and what they're offering, then we're still in a win situation. But I was like, this is such a crazy market. Like as soon as we listed it, we had like 12, 13 showings in 2 days and multiple offers, and some were over asking. So this is a really great strategy, wholetailing in this market. Because you can push the comps. Now, we don't know when that's going to end or if it's going to come to a halt all of a sudden, but then you always have backup plans of keeping this as a rental or keeping it long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I know a lot of people out there that are closing on everything to do wholesale or do rehab, and they're encouraging everybody, why would you just assign the deal if you can make so much more doing it yourself? And, it's not just as easy as saying, here, let me just close on everything. Now, can you get money to close on stuff very easily? Yes. Like that's not your problem. The problem is making sure that, like Carrie just said, you have a backup plan, that the fundamentals are there and the numbers that you're working with, so that if you do end up having to hold it for a year when you were only anticipating 3 months, that you're prepared for that, especially if you've got monthly payments coming out of your pocket. I mean, this one we held last year, it was like $750 a month out of our pocket with no return for a year. So, and I mean, we should have just rented it out or done a lease option or something like that. But again, with it being so far away, it was just, let's just sell it. Like cut our losses, stop the bleeding. We were a motivated seller.
I've been a motivated seller. Yeah. I think if you get experienced enough, you're going to be a motivated seller at one point in your,
and
in your journey.
It's sad too, because like we started out, we were under contract with that one for like 105, something we could have totally taken. We had to end up closing at 86. And we had a cash offer for 90 when we first started. We're like, no, it's worth more than that. And then we had a financing offer at 104. They did the inspection. They were like, oh, it needs, a vapor barrier or something. So will you pay the $7,000 as a credit at closing? And we're like, no, we can get more than that. So we shot ourselves in the foot because we were trying to get every penny out of it. But at the end of the day, it's funny because my initial estimate of its value, if we sold it on the market, it was 85. And we did all this work to it. So it should have been worth more. But, with everything that happened with the title company putting the price up there, and then people knowing what we paid and like turning down offers and then having financing offers fall through because of inspection, and we didn't want to come down on price. It was just a nightmare at the end. We're like, please, somebody just take it.
I get it. I've been there. Well, awesome. Well, this sounds like a great deal. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing it with everyone, because I'm sure a lot of people got a lot of value out of all just the different pieces of this deal, because there were a lot of different pieces of this from start to finish, and just the way that I like to see how other people's brains work, like how you thought of to do it this way versus that way. So thanks so much for coming on. This was awesome. And we're going to have you come on again for Deal Talk once you close the next one.
You're inviting me. Awesome.
Where can people get a hold of you if they have any questions or they want to contact you?
Sure. I'm trying to get on more social media, but Facebook is pretty much the only place that I actually will show up these days consistently. So feel free to reach out to me, Marlena Dates, on Facebook. I also, if you want to sign up for a free 15-minute chat with me, I'm happy to help people answer any questions, point you in the right direction. I also do some coaching. So, if that's something that you're interested in learning more about what we do, then, we can talk about that too. But just get on my Calendly. It's calendly.com/Marlena Dates, and feel free to sign up anytime.
Okay. Well, thanks, Marlena. Thanks for coming on again. All right, you guys, I hope you have a great weekend. TGIF, go do something fun because it's been a crazy week, I'm sure, for most of you. So enjoy the weekend. See you on the next Deal Talk. Remember, you're only one deal away.
Have an awesome day, everyone.